o'clock? It's 7 o'clock. The regular monthly meeting of the Southbury Board of Finance will come to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Seating of alternates. Let's see. Kim indicated that she would be here remotely, possibly. I don't see her on. Casey has been deployed to Washington, and military police in Connecticut National Guard for 2 weeks. Probably. I'm not going to second guess that, but I can't imagine anything else. Steve, I see, is with us remotely.
I'm here.
We have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 regular members. We have an opening. Where's Tom? Tom's there. Steve, I guess
Yeah.
Steve is appointed as a seated member for this meeting.
All right.
Doesn't change much. Everyone's still going to talk anyway. But Steve, glad to have you with us remotely. Please participate as best you can. Approval of the minutes of December 16th. Is there a motion? Do we have a motion? Is there a second? We have a second. Further discussion, additions or corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? So ordered. Public comment. If anyone from the public would like to speak, we've got 2 minutes. We will hear you.
Okay. Good evening. Tom Robertson, 1180 West Purchase Road. Sorry, we don't use microphones. Anyway, that's my wife's house, though. I'd like to comment on the library. I read the voices, $10 million, blah, blah, blah. I would like to know what the future of the bonding or the taxes that are going to be necessary to put this thing back where it belongs as a center of culture and knowledge. There's very little of that anyway. And the library, I think, is the key to that. And I'm very unhappy. Unhappy enough to want to actually move out of this town. So, and seriously considering it. I went to Newtown. They have a whole big. Why doesn't the town of Southbury, for example, say, no, you're not going to build affordable housing up there. You can build your government center up there, just like Newtown. And all the facilities are there, ambulance, fire, whatever. I was very impressed. I lost the bid on the house, by the way, because somebody outbid me. So, but yes, I have a complaint about this. I think it was built incorrectly, and it should have been, here's the library, here's the parking, here's the river. They did this in Milford, Connecticut. Here's the library, here's the parking, here's the harbor. They never had problem. I don't care if it's a 100-year event or a 10-year event. It's bound to happen again. That's my point. And I only see myself and other individuals paying for this over a period of years, whether it's 10, 20, whatever. And I'm not sure how bonding works, but I came here tonight because I'd like to know those kind of things. I don't know if you're going to discuss them, but I would like to know. Because frankly, my 2 minutes is up, that's fine. I know the rules, Robert's Rules of Order. Thank you.
Thank you. Board of Finance had a briefing 2 minutes ago about one of the potential methodologies for funding all this. And I suggest you might want to look at the minutes. That should explain the tentative plan. Okay. If there are no objections, Mr. Kelly has a competing meeting tonight, and he promises to get it over with early and hopefully be here by the end of our meeting. So if you all don't mind, I'd like to take Tom's solar project review and move it to the end of the agenda so we can get as many members here as we can. It's a very important project, a lot of money involved, a lot of good issues and there's a lot to be considered. So are there any objections to that?
Nope.
Hearing none, we will move item 6 to the end of the agenda. First Selectman's report. Mr. Manville is not here. Is there anything that, from him, you understand we need to understand?
No, only that Senator Blumenthal was here today, just giving some news on the continuation of the SBA loans for people that are affected by the flood.
Finance Director's report, fund balance issue versus last year fiscal.
Yeah, so if anyone had a chance to review the financial statements that we had sent out with the agenda, you'll notice that our revenue versus expenditures is running at about $1 million deficit right now, whereas if you look at the past 2 years, we ran at about a $6 million surplus. Part of that has to do with the storm-related cleanup, which was a little over $1 million to date. Another part of it has to do with some tax payments that were put in. Last year, we received them in December. This year, we received them in January. So that deficit will kind of shift back at the end of January, but we do want to watch the storm cleanup because those are things that, as we put a bond package together, we want to make sure we capture everything in there.
So let me get it straight. So the December 31st fund balance difference from last year is due to timing differences?
Timing difference of tax payments and then the storm cleanup.
And the
which
storm
To
cleanup.
date, we were about $1 million.
Which will reverse itself in time?
Yes.
With plans we already have in place?
Yes.
Okay. Questions on that from anybody? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John.
Yes, Steve, comment?
Yeah, just one quick one.
Steve, we can't hear you. Hold on for a second. We're going to turn up the volume. And please speak close to the microphone. We have a meeting in the room next to us that is competing with you.
Yeah, I'm as close to my mic as I can get. Can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Barely. Can some of you hear him?
I can hear him kind of, yeah.
Okay, kind of, okay. Go ahead, Steve, please.
All right. Not my only question, I'll try to yell. Dan, you had said it's a combination of the timing and the storm-related cleanup and the payments that we normally get in December, we got this month. So next month, that report, obviously we'd see it, that deficit shrink, but by how much? I mean, are we going to be kind of close to where we would be historically, or because of the storm cleanup, are we looking at something a little more, a little smaller?
We're going to be a little off, Steve, even next month, basically because of the storm cleanup, because the tax collections will catch up, but the storm cleanup, we're still behind until we put our plan together for debt servicing and things like that. We're still going to be a little behind there.
So, Steve, I think I heard Dan say that before the end of the fiscal year, with the bonding solidified and the storm cleanup better understood, we should be
That's correct, John.
even.
Yeah, we should be
Okay.
even. We're projecting probably roughly to run the same as last year, maybe a little bit below, but pretty much the same as last year. But it will be by the end of the year. So for the next
Okay.
month or two, we're going to see a little bit of a shift, excess over under, but it should make itself whole by the end of the year.
Okay,
Steve?
yeah, that was going to be my follow-up, because, by the end of the year, do we feel comfortable we'd be kind of in line with where we normally are? And it sounds like that's the case.
Yes, I think what you said, Steve, by the end of the year, yes, you're correct. We should be back to where we should be as far as financially.
Yeah, that's what I said. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions or comments on Steve's concern? Okay.
So the other question, the other thing I wanted to touch base on is, as we start to build out and Friday, we had a meeting in Town Hall. Betsy, myself, the first selectman, our Public Works Director, the members of the finance team, and we're starting to build out this whole FEMA reimbursement package. So as we look at what we're gonna need for debt servicing right now, it probably looks like about $10.5 million, based upon the projects that we're going into what we call Category D projects, which are the projects that we are gonna be fully reimbursed from FEMA for. I mean, 75% reimbursement, sorry. The Category B projects are the $1 million that we spent already. So those ones we will put in as soon as we can for reimbursement, and those are the ones like the roads that we put the basic patch and repair on. The Category D, which we're probably looking at debt service, those are things like the tennis court, the library, you know, the bigger roads like Old Waterbury Road and Bucks Hill Road. And those we will be putting in for FEMA reimbursement as well. But we'll be also be putting those in a package for debt servicing.
We had 2 meetings ago, we had a big spreadsheet that sort of showed all those pieces as a model of how it might flow over time with all the different ins and outs. And using that as a format, we'll shovel all these variables back into it, and certainly by the end of March, we'll have something to address on the mill rate. We'll have to. Even if FEMA isn't ready.
Yeah, and if we put it together at the $10.5 million, it does look like, you know, the estimate that we had presented 2 meetings ago, which is about 1/10 of a mil, will probably be that'll be about accurate.
And Tom?
Well, I guess to the gentleman's question, and in things like the library, is there constraints on how we spend the money? I mean, in terms of, do we rebuild it as is? Do we rebuild it, what's our flexibility in terms of how and what we do with something like the library, for instance?
Yeah, the library FEMA the FEMA rep was actually there 2 weeks ago, and they're coming back next week. I think it was next week, right, Betsy? They're coming this Wednesday, sorry, to take measurements and things like that, and just go over the things that we put in. Part of the thing with the library is why we can't open the library right now, there's no fire suppression system in there. And we can't have anyone in that library without fire suppression system. It was completely taken out by the flood. So as soon as FEMA gives us the go-ahead with these projects, then we could start rebuilding the library, including putting in the first thing we have is we did a repair on one of the burners to get temporary heat in the library because we couldn't have it would have been more of a disaster if the pipes froze or anything like that happened. So they repaired that, and then the next would be the fire suppression system.
Right, but I mean, I guess there's a lot of noise now, particularly with California and all that, about not only rebuilding, but rebuilding in such a way that we prevent, it might be the 1,000-year flood, as they say, but
Yeah,
we prevent it.
one of the things we're gonna have to do is build a berm in the back or put floodgates up to prevent this from happening again, because the ramp going down into the library, if we don't fix the area there, it could happen again if we have another storm.
John, may I?
Yes, John?
Just a comment on the whole thing. The way I look at this is on the overall plan. And we have gotten good news from one of the bond rating agencies that even with the plan that Dan has set out, which they have been advised of for funding this, one of the bond rating agencies has already raised the town's rating to AAA. The other bond rating agency, Dan is working on, from what we understand, and the last conversation with them was that the final decision has not been raised, but they are seriously looking at raising our rating to AAA. So when you can get significant bond ratings, and there are few municipalities in the state that actually have AAA, when you can get those type of bond rating increases in the face of this type of a problem that says something about the financial management of the town.
Well, I agree with all that. The thing, I guess, is, you know, again, we're a microcosm of FEMA's problems right now, obviously a lot more. But there's a lot of noise about Build Back Better, right? In other words, that if you're going to, and not Build Back Better in the Democratic sense even, Build Back Better in the sense that if the national taxpayer is going to take money on this, what are we doing the right thing to make sure that next time around, we've done everything we can to prevent it, right?
Yeah, what we found out in dealing with FEMA, Tom, is FEMA's guidelines is replacement, not necessarily build back resilient. And that's what we're looking at right now. So one of the examples we were given by the FEMA representative, if you've paved the road and you have no intention of ripping it up in the next 3 years, then that's good enough for them. They're gonna reimburse us for that. Are they gonna build a new road there? No, they won't. So that's one of the things that we were looking at is are they gonna fully reimburse us for resiliency? And that we're still working on with them. There is 2 pieces to the FEMA. There is after the first reimbursement, there is another resiliency piece. We're not sure it's either 15% or 100%, but they haven't given us the full guidelines on all of that yet. So as soon as we submit the application, we'll have a better understanding of where they are and what they're gonna reimburse us for.
Do we have any idea when it could potentially reopen? I mean, it's been quite a while now, and it doesn't seem like anything significant is moving forward with plans to get it open again, and it's already an expensive situation. And I know the staff are still on, at least some of them are still working now. How long do we see this going on for?
I mean, the best guess, Brian, would be, I think Jeff had said a year to 15 months. It really is based upon when we can start rebuilding in there as soon as we get the information from FEMA. As far as, you know, moving that timeline up, I don't have a great idea on that right now. But probably I would say 15 months would be a worst case scenario.
Just a point, this isn't meant as a criticism, but I don't know of any other businesses in the area that are still closed from that. You know, it seems like this is taking an unusually
Unfortunately,
long period of time.
we were waiting for FEMA to come in, and they just came in 2 weeks ago to do their initial assessment. So we were kind of waiting for them to come in before we started doing it, because we couldn't, if we did put in all new equipment down there, FEMA could come in and say, we're not gonna reimburse you for it, so that would be a difference. So we were waiting to see what they were gonna say
Sure,
before we
okay.
went in and did anything. Now that they're here, I think it will go much quicker.
I think the problem is, if the federal government is going to give us 75% on a significant part of our cost to fix it, the town would have been negligent if we didn't do it the way that the federal government is going to require. And the federal government has been exceptionally slow for whatever reason. They've just been here within the last few weeks, 4 months after this thing happened. And there was just too much money at stake here for us to go ahead and do it right away. If we were going to pay 100% with what, if it's $10 million for everything, you're talking about $7.5 million at 75%. It would have been wrong for the town to, oh, forget that. So I think that is the crux to the reason why all this stuff has waited.
And there are some things that we have to follow, given that we are a government and we are looking for federal funding. There's guidelines that we have to follow that private industry wouldn't have to follow. So those things, if we don't follow those, we won't get reimbursed for them. And the cleanup, just the ServPro cleanup took longer than I think anyone had anticipated. It just took a long time to get just the basement cleaned up to the point where we can get anyone even in there to look at it.
Okay, are we done with this? I want to talk about Tom's comment a little about the Build Back Better and to some extent the public comment. would seem to me, while we're here doing this, if there are some things that we know we should do to protect us from a future event, we ought to seriously consider them. And if the federal government isn't gonna pay it, well, so what? If it's the right thing to do, we should seriously consider it. So when we're working with the Public Works people and Jeff and Dan, if you don't mind, I will carry that message from the Board of Finance that we ought to really be thinking about doing it right, even if it's gonna cost us a little more. I have a gut feeling that within the model that Dan has talked about, a tenth of a mil, and the bonding concept we had put, I suspect we may be able to serve both masters at the same time, live within that budget constraint and ameliorate another 1,000-year flood event.
Yeah, that's exactly.
That's what you want to,
That's my opinion.
that's what we want to do. So I think I'm getting a lot of nods, yeses from Board of Finance members that we want to make sure that is paid attention to and look at the economics of it and make sure it's addressed somehow. May not be yes, but we're going to know what the economics are of the various alternatives. So we'll get that in the minutes, Betsy, that I don't think we need to
Excuse me,
vote on it. I'm just going to declare that all are, yes.
Would that
Kathy?
include relocating all the mechanicals to like the roof, or is that a step too far?
Currently, right now, Kathy, the mechanicals are gonna be in the basement. And we're gonna do every issue to remediate the water issue coming in there. But one of the things that FEMA will do is they'll come back after the fact, and if we have to move anything, that will be another grant that the federal government will work with us on.
Move them up a foot.
Move them up a little bit, yeah.
Maybe they'll be 4 feet off the floor rather than on the floor. I don't
Could be
know.
enough.
But I know it's being paid attention to, and that's
Okay.
what's important. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that, everybody. Dan, financial statements for December 31st. This is a consent agenda item. Does anyone have anything that they would like to specifically address? Dan, is there anything you'd like to bring to our attention?
No, other than if you see the dip in fund balance, but we're working, and we're looking at it closely, and I assume the next couple of months, we'll see that's tick back up to the plus side.
Let's see.
There were no transfers.
No transfers. Future business, cell towers. This keeps coming up.
Still coming up. I haven't had a chance to set the meeting yet. After we get through the budget cycle, which will be Jeff and I will work on finishing his portion of the budget and release it to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, probably the end of February. You guys will get the first look at it. I mean, sorry, the end of January. January 31st or February 1st, we try and shoot for. It's due to be released the 15th, but we try and get it. I can't say in resume, we wouldn't have it for the 31st. And after that, I'll free up my time to reach out to the cell tower people.
And again, this is the First Selectmen's budget, which I believe is the disbursement budget, all the disbursement stuff. Dan will undoubtedly have a draft of what the revenues might look like, but we usually wait for that until the last minute, especially because of how important the state's grant contribution to the town budget
Yeah,
is, so.
unfortunately, the state's fiscal year is different than ours. We get their number sometimes after the fact. Yeah.
So we're gonna make some best guesses. John, you have a comment?
Yeah, just a question.
Closer?
Dan, in developing the budget, I would assume we have been in touch with SAA, with
We have
the
been.
ambulance people,
We have.
because we gave them significant support last year, and you're looking at potential changes in that, whether their revenues are coming up and so forth?
We have, they have had support from the Board of Finance and the Fiscal Office in developing their budget. We fully understand it.
Okay.
And I think as a matter of communication and transparency, we've got everything we need. What we're going to do about all that, maybe a little bit the same situation we were last year, but we know what we're facing.
Okay,
Let's put it that way. So we're in good shape in that regard.
thank you.
Okay, Tom, IPOC.
We had no meeting last time. In the last numbers I've seen in terms of update at the end of November, most people know December was kind of a phone month. So how we get. So we had no IPOC meeting as of the end of November, but this, things were down in December, so it's gonna be worse than this, but this is what it was at the end of November. Pension was up 8% fiscal year to date. Gift fund was up 7.2% fiscal year to date, and the reserve fund was up 4% fiscal year to date. So again, if you annualize those, that all looks very good, but like I said, December was a pretty ugly month for the market, so it's gonna be probably 2 or 3% below that.
Yeah, we were, after just roughly, Tom, as of December, the pension is up 3%. So we lost a little bit in December,
Yeah,
year to date.
That's where we use 5-year smoothing,
yeah.
just for that reason.
Well,
Okay,
I mean, we've had 2 great years back to back.
Yep.
And so
In January-
annualized 3% is still 6%, which
Yeah.
is not bad, right? But again, I think it's gonna be a lot rockier year this year, personally, but we'll see what happens.
when would we normally get December? Because we've got a budget for next year's IPOC fund.
I
I can
have,
push Chris, but he
I
tends to
have
be.
December's numbers.
You have that?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I get them from, I get
Fine.
them monthly from Wells Fargo, so I adjust them before I
Okay,
adjust
fine.
financial statements.
Yeah,
Now, Wells might be up, I get them from principal, so Chris's numbers could be slightly off, but we're
Yeah.
pretty close usually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Board of Education, Janet.
Yes. I'm sure you may have noticed that the Board of Ed won a very nice recognition from CABE.
Closer, please.
Oh, sorry. That the Board of Ed won a very nice recognition from CABE, the Connecticut Association of Boards of Ed. They were presented with that recognition on November 24th. A couple updates on a couple of issues that I've talked about before. The reading curriculum waiver that would cost the region $600,000 minus the $100,000 that they've put towards that, improving their reading curriculum, but are still going back and forth with the state on trying to get a waiver to have to budget that other $500,000. And the internal audit. They did complete their internal audit for 2023-24. It was on the student activity funds. They presented it to the Finance and Facility Committee on 12/11/24. You can see it online as an attachment to the minutes for that date. It's a very colorful presentation. This is just the findings page, which is the last page of the report. And lastly, some budget workshop dates have been set, March 5th and March 19th.
If I could ask, what could possibly cost $600,000 for a reading curriculum? I mean, it's either got to be replacing
Oh, well,
something else.
that's the state's cost to the region. That's a number that the State Department of Education set up. They had done testing, and based on testing in all of the school districts in the state, I think the threshold may have been 75%. I have the original stuff here. But, so if a school district fell below this number that the state picked, I won't say arbitrary, but I'm not sure how they came up with that number. But if a district fell below that number, which the region did fall somewhat below that number, not dramatically below that number, but anyone who fell below that number had to purchase this new reading curriculum at a cost of $600,000 to their school districts. And Region 15 continues, they sent them additional information that the state requested as part of their waiver process. I thought their waiver process was well past, because I thought there was a deadline, but apparently this is still going on and still pending, that the region is fighting, having to purchase these additional curriculum materials and institute this curriculum, with the thinking that the curriculum we have is good and doesn't need improvement, so. But yes, that's, I don't know why the curriculum materials cost $600,000.
John, one question.
Yes, John.
John, do you know, I mean, Region 15 has their internal audit program, we have ours. We look at, what, Dan, 5, 6 areas a year? And we have this whole schedule where we look at everything over a period of years. It seems unusual to me that an institution as big as Region 15, in doing an internal audit program, focuses on only one area, on the student activity side. What about all of the other internal operations going on over there?
Well, I have asked the question in the past, what their plan going forward is for topics that will be under review. And I have told that future topics may include the pension process, the repair bond spending, and the bidding process, and that's one that John Michaels suggested to them. But there haven't been anything in their minutes that have confirmed that this has been under discussion yet, what topics will be up going forward. Additionally, I thought it was kind of interesting that the meeting on in December, and honestly, I just read the minutes and look online for this information, and also reach out to Marion. But that meeting was at 12 o'clock, so I don't know if their meeting times have changed. But if they have, I will start attending them if they're going to be midday during the week. That's a little more convenient for my timeline. But anyway, those are the topics that were mentioned to me in the past as potential areas. But I don't know that they have come up with a list or process for this current school year on what they're going to discuss. And I'm sure they would, as John suggested an issue to them, I'm sure they would be open to any issues that anyone at the table wanted to suggest that they look at.
Tom?
Well, I mean, first thing I was going to ask you, was there any findings in there that were significant?
This is the findings.
Okay, but when you looked at it, did you find anything that was?
Well, I don't know what your report looks like. I feel like it doesn't look like this, you know?
There are lots of ways to present a report.
So I'm just showing you what the attachment was online. I can certainly
actually-
delve further and see if this is how the report was given to the board from the auditors, or if this is sort of something that Joe Martino put together from the information
Okay.
from the
Well,
auditors.
We
but-
could ask for indirectly, I guess.
I would imagine a board like that would like a simple visual graphic presentation that says, okay, not okay, and that's what they're trying to do there, rather than reading pages and pages of details. But
Well,
to-
I can tell you the four areas that were on this were bank reconciliations need to be more timely, timely bank deposits, a formal process needed for writing off old outstanding checks, and lack of purchase orders. So these were the findings. And then the response to each of those findings is written below, or an explanation for each of these situations was written below.
No, I think the question that raises to me
John, closer, please.
is, were these findings solely found in the Student Activities Fund? Or are these types of findings prevalent across all of their operations? And if they're prevalent, again, regarding all of their operations, that is a much more significant issue to be dealt with than if it's just in the student activities fund.
I guess it's nice to be quoted as a source for an area of investigation from the Board of Education, but I'm afraid I was unable to separate a concept from an example when I mentioned that particular thing. Given John's concern and my concern for my inability to communicate properly, I'm going to suggest that our Internal Audit Committee draft a formal written request to the Board of Education, clearly, much more clearly stating in writing than I did verbally, no doubt, what it is we do, why we do it, and what we suggest they consider, the methodology and the path that they do, because it doesn't seem that they're doing what, over the several years now, we have suggested they do. So I'm hearing what people are talking about, and why it isn't being done, because I think it's time for us to, our board, to formally write their board and express exactly what it is we think they should be doing and why. So, John, we will do that as an internal audit committee, unless you guys object, or if you have another way for us to maybe more clearly express what we want. We've done it verbally, but it's not getting there.
Would it make sense to reach out to the Middlebury Finance Board to see what their thoughts are on the information there? I mean, having one town complain is one thing, having both towns complain might make a difference.
They don't do an internal audit, so
Fair.
they're standing in
Oh, okay.
explaining what should be done, why, and how. It's just fluff and mustard. It's not substantive, I don't think.
Okay.
So that's a good suggestion, but in this particular case, it may not work.
Plus, I don't think you're suggesting it be framed as a complaint. I think you're suggesting it be framed as helpful guidance.
Well, that's our
And-
suggestion.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, you know, having been on the Board of Ed, I can tell you that you all are on this board because of expertise that you have in this particular field. That's not necessarily the case with the board members who are on the
Right.
Finance and Facilities Board. So I would hope and you know, that they would be very open and see it as helpful.
I would hope so.
Hope so.
I would think so.
Yes.
Okay. Next, Insurance Working Group. We have nothing. We have not any meetings and no reason to meet. The budget for the health plans and the liability insurance, where are we with that?
Looks like the health insurance is probably gonna be between 10 and 12% increase. In the general liability insurance, we're probably looking at a 8 to 9% increase budgetarily for next year.
It looks like the inflation of the last 2 years is finally catching up to us. The town has been sort of insulated from it for any one of a number of reasons.
Well, I'm seeing the same thing in my personal stuff, too.
But it's finally catching up. I know the health district has the same thing with cyber insurance, liability insurance, health insurance. It's
Yeah.
finally catching up. Brian?
You were seeing it too, this is especially a high year for increases in medical insurance.
In which kind?
Medical
Medi-
and other types of general insurances as well, but it's a big jump this year. I've seen 18 to 28%,
Say that again?
18 to 28% until you negotiate it down, but that's what they try to get through with.
Plan for plan? Just. Well, I guess if we can get away with 12, we should be feeling pretty good, but that's difficult to swallow. Okay, I don't know, maybe maybe we could get together as a committee, you could get us together sometime in February
Yeah.
with
we'll,
Art.
We'll call Art and Scott.
and Scott, and
from
have them meet
Seeger.
with us.
Absolutely. Yep.
Just, because this is such a big number with a big increase, just to do that? Okay, if you'll set
absolutely.
that up, thank you.
We'll do that.
Roads and bridges, Jack is not here. Maybe when he gets here, he can give us a brief on that. RUPAC, we have not met. Strategic planning, John.
Strategic Planning Commission is now defunct. All terms except two have expired. There have been no new people appointed, and the two people who remain submitted resignations to the town clerk in the first week of January. So although
done.
on the books there is a Strategic Planning Commission, nothing is being done. There are no members remaining.
It would seem then that because there is no reason for the Board of Finance to have a liaison of strategic planning, we should remove that from our monthly reports, because there will be nothing
Yeah.
to report.
Does that mean I get a pay decrease?
Yeah.
We won't ask for a refund.
So,
Energy-
John, though, is the defunct strategic planning a good thing or a bad thing? Or is it good that we haven't?
Depends what side of the issue you're on, I guess, but
Well, John sat through it, so I mean, what's your opinion, John?
John, please, closer,
What I
please.
will say on that is, I'm also on this Charter Revision Commission they have, and the Charter Revision Commission does have a sense, and has developed a sense, that there is a need for strategic forward planning. And how that is going to be handled with any recommendation from the commission, or if and to whom that responsibility will be assigned. No decision has been made yet, and that'll come out when the Strategic Planning Commission presents its recommendations to the town board.
Okay.
Brian?
Forgive my ignorance, but it never made sense to me to have a strategic planning committee, because what you have is basically a small group trying to dictate the direction that the town's going, and there are other groups that are tasked to do that, and I'm not sure why we would have a strategic planning committee when we have a first selectman and his staff. Just my opinion.
We've talked about this more than once. There are people on both sides of that issue.
And John, I apologize, I never brought it up to this committee, but given that the Charter Revision Committee is meeting, is there anything this committee would like us to present, or me to present to the Charter Revision Committee?
Thank you. I think I have been negligent in not addressing that. The Board of Finance, over the last decades, has periodically been bringing items forward. They have adopted, I think, all the suggestions we've had to change a variety of things over the years, and the things that we have suggested that they change, that they have not changed, have been contrary to what the statutes allow us to weigh in on. So that's the history. I don't think we've talked the last couple of years about anything structurally in our charter that the Board of Finance would like to see changed. If I'm just doing that from memory right here, right now. Let's do this. Let's put an agenda item on for new business, charter revision suggestions, and we'll challenge each other consciously or subconsciously to think about what the Board of Finance cares about that might be considered by charter revision formally at our next meeting, because we do need to get it to them. But and Dan, if your office has anything in purchasing or.
Yeah, we've made some suggestions to the committee, we're just waiting, we're gonna meet with them I'm gonna meet with them
Yeah,
at the next meeting.
Dan and his staff have made several suggestions that are now on the Charter Revision Commission's list of reviewing. And most of them are going to come up at its next meeting in late January. Most of them were technically issues about how the charter says to do things that are not in compliance the way markets work. And like, there's a thing in there that basically says all bills have to be paid by check, and we can be paying electronically. And we have a list of things that Dan and his staff have recommended, and every one of those is and will be up on the agenda at the next meeting of the Strategic Planning Commission to take a look at. But keep in mind, that commission doesn't make the final decisions. That commission makes recommendations to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen then says, okay, these are the ones we will move forward on. We will present these to the voters and so forth and so on.
It may be helpful, in that regard, it may be helpful if the board, Dan, if the Board of Finance were to concur in your recommendations.
Okay.
So if you could send us
I'll send the list.
the list of things you are recommending, and then we will opine on that in addition to whatever we might come up with.
We'll do that.
That makes sense. Thanks for that, John.
Is there a list?
Kathy?
Is there a list somewhere of what all the suggestions are? Like what they're
on the
reviewing?
compu-
They're on the
ta-
website?
All of them on the town website, under the
Okay.
Strategic Planning Commission. There is a list of all of the recommendations that have been made and where they have come from, what has come from the public, what has come from people in town. There is a specific list on the town website of all of those things.
Okay.
Excuse me?
You said strategic plan, you meant charter, right?
The issue is which one of those recommendations that people are talking about are actually charter issues.
No, that's fine. I mean, because I've seen recommendations out there too, but I guess the ones I'm most interested in are ones that are going to have made it to
And, I mean, you know, there are a lot of things on there, like somebody came in and there's a formal recommendation that we need drive-in restaurants. No, that's a planning and zoning issue, that's not a charter issue. But that doesn't mean that other town bodies can't take a look at what's coming in from the public, but that's,
Well, I don't know, I guess I get a little confused. I've seen, in the Energy Task Force, I've seen this a little bit, is the thought by some people that we ought to move certain kinds of agenda items into the charter, and I don't really think the charter's the right place for that sort of thing. You know, the charter tends to be sometimes, like, it's more, kind of rules of the road than a sort of a strategic plan.
Yeah.
There's a difference between a strategic plan
there
and a
is
charter.
without doubt, yeah.
And, so, but I'm, while I guess I care about a strategic plan, I really care about charter issues because they become more restrictive, and I want to make sure that whatever we put into the charter, we don't tie our hands about something.
It's a
All
very-
all I will say to that, Tom, on behalf of that commission, is that that commission is very, very attuned with what you're saying. And there are a lot of things that are coming in that we don't believe at this point are charter issues. And what will get in the final recommendation is what the members of this commission believe are charter issues and not things that will preclude other town bodies from doing what these other town bodies do.
I guess what I'm calling out, and I'm hoping it'll just happen naturally, but besides the things that I trust, Dan and whatever you bring us that are good charter changes, that somehow if we're not paying attention, some bad charter changes are gonna come in and cause us big problems. And so, I don't know, I mean, when it gets close to real charter time, we should probably give the whole thing a read and try to make sure there's not any, new stuff that's gonna cause us problems that, there wasn't there before.
I will just say that anyone from like the energy committees and these things, all of the Charter Revision Commission meetings are open to the public, and you can come in at any time and make that recommendation, and it will go on the list. Whatever somebody comes in and talks to us about will go on a list, because Joe Ruggiero, who is chairing that commission, is keeping a list, and it is on the town website
Okay.
of all of the recommendations that have come in.
To Tom's point, many organizations have this same thing with constitution and bylaws versus policy and procedures manuals. And when you get your policies and procedures embedded in your bylaws, then as circumstances change, it's a huge problem to deal with the way the world changes. And I'm wondering if we ought to ask the Charter Commission relative to specifically bills being paid by check versus electronically. That doesn't seem a governance issue that ought to be in a charter. It ought to be in a policies and procedures manual that needs to be controlled and administered by the Board of Selectmen, so there's oversight on how we do things and what we do. How to separate governance fundamental things from policies and procedures, I don't know. But I hear what you're saying. A lot of entities have the same problem. I might go to the next Charter Revision Committee and offer that as an overview comment.
All I know is, I guess,
Because,
when we get close to, I mean, again, I don't particularly want to show up at the Charter Committee the first 16 times and listen to the 101 kind of different, everybody's ideas about how to change the charter. But when we get close, I feel like besides making sure that the things we want are in there, we should make sure there's not things in there that we don't want. And I guess I'll trust John's judgment and whatever, but I think we should take a thorough look when we get close to a charter rewrite to make sure there, besides the things we want are in there, but there's not new things that we don't want in there.
I think we also have to remember, as a Board of Finance, we're elected to address fiscal matters.
Well, I agree, and that's why I'm just talking solely about fiscal matters. Like, so I'm talking about things where the pragmatics, somebody's putting it in for all good purposes, I guess, but the pragmatics of what it's gonna cause us headaches fiscally, we should review
Right.
it from that perspective. I'm not reviewing it from what I believe politically or anything like that. I mean, it's more it's more about reviewing it from what kind of the pragmatics of putting it in the charter, what it means for us from a Board of Finance perspective.
And to that regard, there is finance sections in the charter, and sometime between now and when we meet again, I would challenge each of us to read the charter provisions that relate to the areas we're responsible for, so that we will have been refreshed just before our next meeting. Okay. Energy Task Force, we're going to wait until after the ARPA, and then we're going to do that.
Yes.
Dan, ARPA.
The only thing we had with ARPA was the task force voted to move the $1.5 million from Pierce's Hollow Village to the ladder tower, which was in our funding plan. And I wrote a memo to the Board of Selectmen. It's going to be on their agenda next meeting. Is all the ARPA money now been allocated or reallocated to where it's going to end up? It's been, yeah, every penny's been allocated, reallocated.
And been reallocated to everything to the truck? They closed out ARPA to the truck?
We do have the splash pad open, but we're moving that to the infrastructure to offset the difference in the actual cost of the splash pad to what's been ARPA allocated.
So ARPA money is going to go to the splash pad or the truck, and then it's done?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Dan, just one question. On the ARPA funding, we have funded some organizations that are other than the town itself. And those contributions to them are made in accordance with what they tell us they want to use the money for. Is there any follow-up to be sure that they actually use the money for that?
Yeah, what we did when we issued the grants, the small grants to the nonprofits, I think, Tom, you were on that committee, to do that. At the end of the year, every one of those recipients submitted to us where they spent the funds, with the exception of one who returned the funds because they ended up going out of business. So they returned the funds, and those funds are reallocated to, I believe, Sustainable Southbury for the food scraps program at the transfer station.
Okay, super, thank you.
Okay, Energy Task Force and the
Yeah, well, this
solar
is the,
project.
this is,
Tom,
the
you're
solar
on.
project is what's the Energy Task Force been focused on.
It is.
Okay. Okay, so we've, in the Energy Task Force, have been very focused the last 6 months or so on solar project at the transfer station. Because, we got together with Blake and Jeff and all the interested parties, and after, we, if you remember, a year ago, we were gonna try to stick our toe in the water with a project over one of the parking garages for the police station, but that we didn't win in the auction, and it turned out maybe that wasn't a great thing to do after all because of other things there. So we regrouped and met with Jeff and Blake, and everybody seemed to think the best idea for us to pursue for the next project was at the transfer station. So that's what we've been doing. We put out, again, I always get RFQ, RFP, those two things.
We did an RFP.
We put an RFP out,
something.
RFP. We put out an RFP, and we got a bunch of bids for that, for two approaches, right? One approach is just a lease arrangement, a lease kind of PPA arrangement, which is basically, we take minimal risk, and the company builds it, runs it. They'll pay us for the use of our property, and they'll give us small energy offsets. So we still have to pay energy bills. We would get small credits for our energy offsets. That's one approach. The other approach is kind of all in. We go and we pay somebody to build the solar up there. We own it. We're kind of, we probably have to pay somebody broadly to maintain it, and we insure it, all that kind of stuff. But we would get much bigger rewards out of that in the following sense, is that we would, we would get all our power paid for. That's what, in essence, we'd offset all the power needs for the town. In this case, and the one group that bid for us, they thought they could build a power array up there that would generate 2.5 times the power we need for the town. So the other 1.5 power we need for the town, we could sell in some form and make money off of it. Okay, so those are the two extreme approaches, two extremes of approach. The other thing I'll say is what makes them financially kind of viable now, or particularly the build it, is a subsection of the IRA bill, which we as a town get the money directly that would be the tax credits that the companies used to get for building it, right? So, and not clear to me past this year whether that's going to be still there or not, right? So, a third option always is, again, just wait and not do anything and just see what happens in the future. But there's a little bit kind of time is of the essence around the kind of financial viability of the things we're talking about right now, because we can get roughly 40% of our upfront investment back from through the IRA kind of credit that we would get if we did it. with that in mind, there's 3 auctions this year. You know, you have to go through these auctions to get the state credits for it. And there's 3 auctions this year. One is at the end of February. So if we, you know, and one is in April and one's in August. And again, there's no guarantee you get anything on these auctions, but but you have a kind of working chance, you know, 25, 40, 50% of getting what you asked for. So if we really want to do something, I think from a financial perspective particularly, it behooves us to try to do it this year. And with that in mind, if we want to get into the February auction, we need to get our act together in the next month or month and a half, okay? I got a thing from Davis Hill today after we talked saying they would really like us to kind of, you know, give them definitive direction by February 15th. So now, we don't have to go into the auction how all the I's dotted or the T's crossed, but we probably have to make up our mind about whether we want to pursue the lease agreement or the full build, okay? And, you know, one or the other. I think we can go in with A or B, but not both. And so, from the bids, and I think we're gonna proceed as follows. We're gonna have a special meeting, maybe, where we're gonna get a presentation where I'll be here and the rest of the Energy Task Force, the PB Energy Task Force, Jim Templeton and Chuck will be here, and we'll go through, and I've already looked, the Energy Task Force has already looked at a sort of financial projections, but we'll go through all that. We'll go through all the other aspects of it. But what I want to put in everybody's mind tonight is thinking about, you know, either way is going to take, I think the negotiations will be a lot simpler if we just go for the lease option. But if we go for the full, full ownership option, there's probably a lot of stuff that the Energy Task Force wants to do between now and that meeting and soon thereafter. And so I'm going to throw out some rough numbers. I threw out some rough numbers in that email. But if the consequences of owning are so onerous, right, the money is so big that we can't get it past this board, then we'll just focus our attention on the lease option and not focus our attention on that. But the relative benefits, so in monetary terms, the relative benefits are probably about 4 times as much to own under reasonable assumptions. Now, there's more risk there and all the things that go with it, and it requires upfront money, which is dire, is kind of, with all the thing with the flood, is difficult right now. It's my thought that the owning looks more attractive, much more attractive to me than the lease. But I'm just one person on this board, and we have to make the decision jointly. So that's the kind of preview, and we'll sort of be leaking, or giving out more and more information leading up to the meeting. But and to give you some rough numbers, the upfront cost of that we've got to do the big build, but the big build's like, again, it's twice plus the power we need, but the big build is about $4.5 million, okay? That would be offset by about, 1.75 to 2 million of government credits. And it would, again, if it all went to plan, it would offset all our power needs, or, not, you're talking about delivery versus the, generation. It would offset half of all of our power needs. And it obviously would give us a hedge against inflation, energy inflation, in that way. And we'd have another, you know, another, our power needs plus to sell somehow and make money off of over time. Probably the best way to sell it would be to see, for instance, if Woodbury or Middlebury really wanted in on the deal. And if one way to go in with them would be that they maybe would take a third of, or some percentage of the upfront costs off of us. So then the upfront cost, again, might be, you know, lower for us because they would take some of that off. And, so, you know, so if we go down that route, there's a lot of maybe maneuvering we'd like to do as an Energy Task Force in between now and whenever we want to go forward with the proposal. But I don't want us to bend over backwards on this and everybody say, no, we have no interest in that. You know, we have no interest in putting up any kind of money up front.
So let me offer how I think we ought to proceed and what it is we as a board are responsible for here. You would like to have an answer by February 15th, which is when there's going to be an auction.
Well, February 5th, the auction has to be submitted by close to the end of February, the beginning of March. But anyway,
You need a decision
we need the decision to
so
go
that you can
forward
do everything you have to do to be
by
in the
February
auction.
15th.
The auction gives us an option to proceed with
Either,
a path.
right.
So we are not deciding to do this. We're deciding to enter the auction and spend $25,000, which may or may not be refundable if we continue, well, if we get in the auction.
If we win the auction and we turn it down, we lose the 25,000. If we lose the auction, we get it back.
Okay, so what's going to be at risk is $25,000 to maybe do something in this regard. You want an answer by February 15th so you can do the things you have to do to get in the auction. We have a meeting on February 10th, regular monthly meeting. I think Tom has suggested, and I think it's a good idea, that because there's so much potential, so much money, we're talking net $2.5 million after credits that we might have to put up front. That's not nothing. That's a big deal for us. We ought to have a special meeting and invite the members of the Board of Selectmen, I'm sure they would care, to talk specifically about this. Spend an hour, hour and a half, however long it takes, so that we really understand what we're doing. So sometime between now and the 10th, hopefully maybe the last week in January, the first week in February, Dan, you guys can have a definitive, extensive financial briefing with slides and PowerPoints, et cetera, so that we could really understand it and ask questions. And if our questions need to be researched, you could come back to us by the 10th when we would have a motion to approve the $25,000. So that seems to make a lot of sense. Let me,
I'm waiting. Oh, are you
no,
done?
go ahead.
Would
go-
it make sense to have two proposals, one if we win the bid and one if we don't win the bid?
Well, I think what we really need to do now is decide whether A or B. Like, I mean, to some degree, beside, so just to give you the alternate thing, so what we got was, we've got $75,000 a year for almost a no-risk thing, okay, for a very low-risk thing, okay? So we could get the lease agreement and we could probably bargain, maybe we get up to $100,000 a year. We might get $100,000 a year, and I think, you know, most members here, once you understood that, would agree, well, why not? It's like the cell tower, you get $100,000 a year. The thing is that are we giving it away? Like, you know, like Dick used to always argue that we should sell back the cell tower, or whatever, whichever side, but are we on the right side? You know, so we could go for a fairly low-risk solution. I mean, we could go for no solution, but we could go for a fairly low-risk solution that doesn't cost us too much agony, I think, and get $75,000 to $100,000 a year. Or we could go for the higher, the bigger kind of all-in kind of thing, and potentially generate a lot more. But it's got more risk and it's got upfront money, right? And so so I mean, I think there's probably a three-way decision when we get there, right? Go or, don't go at all. Let's just wait, forget it, right? Or go with the lease, the 75 to 100, or go with the big project, okay?
Kathy, to your question, I think as a result of what we do at that special meeting, that might be answered. We might be on a path to answer that question. The fundamental thing that we need to focus on is, do we have a no-risk $75,000 to $100,000 rental of a piece of land so someone else can do this? Or do we want to put in net $2.5 million and over a period of somewhere between 5 and 10 years, get all our money back with some surety, that's what we have to, that'll be part of the discussion. And then have the residual years after we've gotten our money back, continue to save significant energy costs.
It's energy costs and some net of like $450,000 a year.
So we will, that's the idea. And the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance will say, both of them have to say yes, either of them can say no to the idea. Because this is, to me, a purely financial risk-reward question, I think the Board of Finance needs to take the lead and give the Board of Selectmen our best opinion and rationale, supporting or not what this recommendation is. So I think, Tom, I think that's where we are. That's the fundamental.
Just one, if I could ask, when you do this analysis and you're looking at A or B, can you identify whether there's a difference in the investment in time and energy and expertise by the town employees? Because a lot of times when you're getting into this, you have to figure out whether we've got the bandwidth to be able to take on something like that.
I agree, and I think we've tried to keep, Blake and Jeff, right, abreast of this all the way. But certainly, we're going to have meetings with them, independent of this big meeting before that time about this.
So again, we're going to have a special meeting in the next few weeks with in-depth study of all the options and pros and cons. We'll vote on February 15th. February 10th is our board meeting. We're going to vote on spending $25,000 to possibly win the auction. And then we'll have more time to delve farther into all the pluses and minuses of the fully owned option. The other one's simple, but there, as you explained, we could have a joint venture with Middlebury. We could do something with a region. We could do something with Woodbury. We could do something alone. There's so many things.
But I think, though, like I was saying, is we have to choose A or B into the auction. Like we can't.
I understand that.
Uh-huh.
And we will solidify our thinking and be sure we're going to have to decide which path we want to take on the 10th. But if we take the risky path with the big money investment and the various options of how it might be put together going forward, we will have time to study all those various options, because there's a lot of moving parts in.
Right, and we can always, so we can go in with the big option and even win and still say no.
And still say no.
And we lose 25,000, but we can still say
Right.
no, right? So, and I'm guessing we could probably go back with the less risky option. One of the reasons why I think so of the three, there's the three auctions. There's two are the NRES options, and one's is called the SCEF option, and that's the one in April. The SCAF option probably isn't the one that we can go into for the lease option. So that the SCAF, part of the reason why I think he sized it as big as he did was we are probably a sure winner in the April option with a big size.
Tom, I think we got
But-
too many things
too
for
many
us to be
things.
juggling.
But yes, so so in February, we're gonna choose A or B or nothing, okay? And, but even if we chose A, the big one, all right, that at most we're putting at risk right away, you know, is 25,000.
If over time, after more study, because we're going to do more study than just what we do at the special meeting, we will have time yet again to say, okay, it looked like it was going to work, but the deeper we get into it, we say, no, we don't think it will. Or, yes, it will. And then we'll have another vote to proceed at some time. So that's what we're doing. There's a lot of money at stake here, one, to put up front, and two, to save over time. And we absolutely need to not be flippant about making a decision. There's a lot at stake here for the taxpayers on both sides. John,
Just one question, Tom. If we go into the auction and we put the 25,000 up, okay, and. I mean,
closer, John, please.
yeah, there are, my understanding is there are multiple people who will be awarded a part of the auction.
Yes.
So we put up 25, we get a part of the auction depending on what we put in for. If we get accepted, can we then pull out and say no after we're accepted and get the 25,000 back, or do we forfeit the 25,000?
We forfeit the
You forfeit.
25,000. We
Okay.
get accepted. That's why the 25 is at risk.
That's what I figured.
That's a
Okay.
decision.
But we lost last time, and so if we lose, we get the 25,000
We get the money
back.
back if we lose.
Okay, are there any more? I think we beat this one to death without a lot of numbers to look at. And Kathy, we will be addressing your question at our meeting on the, special meeting on the 10th.
But again, sort of send me or send the Energy Task Force any specific kinds of concerns or things you'd like us to address as part of the presentation.
In the meetings, almost over. Your thoughts at this point? We beat it to death so far. Is there anything else that someone would like to add to the agenda? No issues? The meeting is adjourned, and we will see you probably at a special meeting that'll be called the last week in January, the first week in February, to address this. Okay? Thank you all.